welcome back to the Robbins Business Show. Great to have you back, and we've got a really interesting, penetrating presentation in this episode about banking relationships. And of course, the Robbins Show is all about developing your best business ideas. And the idea behind the show is to promote the growth in long-term, interesting, and higher-paying careers in Southeast Massachusetts. And I am the host, Bill Fox, and the co-host is none other than Coach Robbins, Cliff Robbins.
Bill, Coach, right?
I keep calling him Coach. He's my coach. And we're going to proceed immediately to the regular part of this show. Opening part of the show is called Cliff Notes. Cliff's Notes, and this is where we take advantage of the fact that Cliff is a extremely knowledgeable senior business advisor for the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center Network. And he travels widely. He advises existing businesses, businesses that are starting up brand new, fresh, or even people who just have an idea, a wisp of an idea,
right,
and so forth. And so we like to take advantage of his broad knowledge of a business scene in New England. And Cliff, what have you got for us tonight?
Well, Bill, thank you very much. Yes, we're going to jump right into Cliff Notes for several reasons. We've got a great show for you tonight. Last week, for those of you that saw it, I sang on Cliff Notes. And as you said, Bill, the email has been swamped with requests. And tonight I'm not going to sing.
Okay. Well.
Tonight I'm just going to speak seriously about banking relationships. The show is about banking relationships. One of the things I want to mention about relationships is people are starting and running their small businesses. They need help. They need a brain trust. They need people that can advise them in different areas. Certainly one of the most important areas is your accountant, your CPA, your bookkeeper. It's very important for you to keep accurate records so that you know what's going on in your business and so that you can use the financial statements as management tools for your business. Another good person to have available to you is a lawyer. There are times when you need a little legal advice, and it's important that you get good proper advice. I'm very big on a board of advisors for small business people, to put together a cross-functional team of people that can give you advice and just other brains, other very smart people. Southeastern Mass has a lot of very bright people that would be very willing to sign on and be part of your board of advisors. And these are not paid positions. These are just smart people that want to help you. And certainly one of the people that you really need on your side is your banker, because your banker is a very important team member. And what I'd like to talk about in Cliff Notes just briefly is the importance of having and solidifying your banking relationship now. The economy is we're in very difficult economic times. It's very important for you, if your business is running and you have a banking relationship, to communicate with the bank, to solidify the banking relationship, to make sure that that's a partner that's there, because it's a very important partner for you to continue to operate your business. And so I very highly say to people, make sure you stay close to your bank, get the numbers to them, make sure they're aware of the fact that you're a viable business and that you're going to be here for the long run, because they'll feel much more secure in knowing that they've got an investment in your business. So solidify your banking relationships.
That's great. And we're going to talk more about banking in this episode.
Yes.
We have our guest is Melinda Ailes.
Yes, for the third time.
Third time.
Yep.
It is third.
She's the star.
We've had Melinda on before. She's a very, very knowledgeable person. She is also Cliff's boss.
She's my fearless leader.
So you have to be on your best behavior.
No, she knows me that well.
Okay. She's the director for the Southeast
Regional Director.
Regional Director,
right.
Southeast Massachusetts office for the Massachusetts Small Business Development.
Yep.
And runs a tight ship.
When I look for assistance and reading a business plan, looking at the financials, I immediately send them to her, because the things just speak to her.
The question is, I have for the viewers of the show, my question is, do you know this lady?
Right.
and maybe some of you do. If you are among those who do not, that is really in a way your fault, because she's easy to contact. She's available. She wants to be available to small business people
Absolutely.
who are either as an existing business is running well and wants to expand, an existing business that's running into trouble, or someone who wants to start a business. It doesn't matter. That's what you and Melinda and your other colleagues are all about.
Absolutely. We have a young lady, Trish White, who's just fabulous.
Oh, wonderful. So you guys, they're in the book, they're on the internet, easy to contact, and you should. And Melinda has a background in financial consulting and strategic planning. And commercial banking, by the way. She's very strong in that, which is a good reason to have her on tonight.
Right.
And she has held, senior management positions at several banks in small business, commercial lending, strategy, and product development.
I like to say she's wicked smart.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, enough of that. But just so everyone knows, we're talking to someone who's highly competent, interesting, and should be heard. And Melinda, it's great to have you back on the show again.
Melinda, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. You two make me blush.
You deserve it.
You deserve it.
Yeah.
You deserve it.
Tonight's show on the Cliff Notes, as you heard, I was talking about banking relationships, and when you have a banking relationship in any economy, but especially in this economy, you want to make sure you solidify it, you stay close to your banker. We're going to talk about something slightly different here. What do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about the unfortunate circumstance when you get a letter in the mail from your bank.
Right.
And you see this letter, you don't know what it means, you start to panic, you get angry, you don't know why you got it,
Okay.
and pretty much it's the bells of Haiti.
The ship has hit the sand, I like
Yes,
to say.
that's what's happened. And so
show.
I want to talk about the fact that very often this letter that you receive is not the first one that you've gotten,
Right,
but it's the first time you've read it.
right.
It somehow, bank communications often slip through the crack. So all of a sudden you've got this letter and you've got to figure out what it says. And there are two types of letters that come from the bank. One is called a default letter, and one is called a demand letter. And the default letter is when you get notification that your company has violated one of the covenants in its agreement. And this letter is sent to you because, one, they want to get your attention and have you not violate the covenant, and two, it protects the bank's rights. Because if they were not to notify you of it, you could claim that, well, they just disregarded it, so it's not important.
Right.
The second type of letter is different. It's called a demand letter.
That's worse.
That's much worse.
I thought so.
And that's a letter where the bank says, the jig is up, pay me,
Right.
and pay me now.
Right.
And so that is a far more threatening type of letter, because it's, oh my goodness, the sky is falling down.
Now, you're going to get a demand letter if you're in default? Is that what you're saying?
You might,
Yeah.
but you also might not. Very often a default letter is the first bullet across the bow.
Right, yeah.
And that just says, may I have your attention, please?
Yeah, you have not lived up to something in
You
the
haven't-
contract.
Exactly. You
Right.
haven't lived up to the agreement.
Right.
And therefore, we want your attention and we want this fixed and we want it now. The demand is usually more serious than that, and it says, we're getting nervous about our loan to you,
Right.
and whether you're actually going to be able to pay it back.
Right.
So we're going to use a hammer
Okay.
to get your attention. And when it's a demand letter, you almost always either have to leave the bank or repair your relationship with the bank under an agreement that's called a forbearance agreement, which we're going to talk about in a little
Oh,
bit.
okay. All right, cool.
Okay.
All right.
So I think what we want to think about is what do you do first? And I'm going to tell you, although it seems simple, the first thing to do is don't panic.
Right. That's always a good start.
Because very often you do panic
Yeah.
because you don't understand why. You've missed the previous signals from the bank, and so you're not as level-headed as you want to be.
Right.
And that's coupled with you need to identify the problems. What is it that's actually wrong? What does this letter say that is the problem? What are the problems with my business? Are they cash flow problems? Are they sales problems? Are they merely covenant violation problems? Because those aren't quite as serious. The next thing is that you really want to keep your cool.
Yeah, don't panic.
Well, no, it's more than not just panicking.
Right.
Very often you're angry.
Oh,
You're
that could be even
angry
worse. Yeah.
because you've made every payment to the bank. How could they send you this letter when you've paid your interest, you've paid your principal, you've been on time?
And you haven't violated any of the covenants?
Well, you don't think you have.
Oh, okay.
So you actually...
Can they send you a demand letter if you have not, in fact, broken any of the covenants of the contract?
There is almost always two ways that can happen.
Yeah.
The first one is if your loan has covenants, there is a covenant in it called material adverse change. And that's when, under their determination, something has changed.
Right.
The second is a lot of the notes, particularly in lines of credit versus term loans, are written as demand notes.
Okay.
Now, they have usually a year or 2 years on them, but the term of the note is a demand.
Okay.
So you might have made every payment. You might not have violated a covenant like a leverage ratio.
Right.
But there's been a material adverse change, or they can just make demand. Unfortunately, we've actually seen in this economy banks making demand because they don't like the industry.
Right.
We have seen that.
That's why I asked that question, because I have seen that. I've seen banks cutting or eliminating lines of credit for, for some
That's
time.
why it's so important that you communicate with your bank.
Right.
You need to talk with the bank and ask them what are their issues, because you may not actually know. And it's part of your dialogue with the bank to determine what really is their agenda, because the wording of the letter may not be exactly what's going on.
Right.
So you want to not only talk with them, you want to see if you can meet with them.
We're always talking to people about communicating with their creditors. Well, the banker is a creditor, and you're saying the same thing. Communicate, right.
Yeah. And then your next step really is getting some help.
Right.
Because you probably haven't been in this situation before. Right?
Yep.
So you wouldn't decide that you were just going to go, well, you might, because you're a pilot, fly a plane without a pilot.
Right.
And this is a unique situation.
You need
so
some expert that knows how to give you some guidance.
Get some help. And actually, I've seen some troubled situations go sour because the company hasn't wanted to either commit the resource of time and effort to getting some advice, or hasn't wanted to commit the money that they might need to pay an outside advisor. And what I'm talking about is attorneys who are schooled in turnaround, potentially even bankruptcy, accountants that are familiar with this, and there's a whole school of consultants out there that are called turnaround experts.
That's the key word, turnaround.
Yep, or corporate revitalization.
Corporate revital.
And these folks, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and they will save you so much time and effort because they know how to speak bank.
Right.
They know some of the things that need to be done the quickest. Now, the next thing that you're doing is you're generating information. Almost always, either for the default letter or the demand letter, the bank is asking you for stuff.
Right.
And what it wants...
Information.
Yep, information.
Financials and...
And it's looking for your performance information, which would be your P&L and then your balance sheet. But it's also looking for accounts payable agings, accounts receivables aging. And it's always going to want something that's called a 13-week rolling cash flow.
Oh, but we talked about cash flow.
Oh, cash flow. That sounds familiar.
Exactly. And it's very important that this is a rolling cash flow that you create each week. So you're anticipating all of the, and this is my technical accounting term, all of the goes innas and goes outas.
Right. Yeah.
And they're
I
going.
understand those gazintas and gazotas.
The gazintas
we
and
talked about it
gazotas.
in one of our shows about cash flow.
Yep.
And I said, look, you got to pay attention to the gazintas
Yep.
and the gazotas and when they're happening.
Yep. And here the communication with the bank is absolutely critical, because the bank is going to require information and you get it to
Right.
them.
Immediately.
Or if you can't get it to them immediately, you tell them you can't.
Right.
And when you can get it to
Communicate.
them. Right. What you don't want to do is say, okay, you're going to have all my statements on Friday, and then you don't do
Right.
it. That's actually a real serious problem.
Right.
The other part of that is, if your company is experiencing difficulty and it's going to have to improve its performance, so it might be in jeopardy for survival, your bank can be your greatest ally.
Right.
And so you want to approach them as if they are your greatest
Right.
ally.
Absolutely.
Okay?
They can
And
keep you in business.
they can keep you in business,
Right.
and they will most often, because it's not in their best interest to see you tank.
Right.
On the other hand, you may have a dispute. And therefore, in your communication with the bank, you want to not just rely on oral communication.
Oh,
If
okay.
your banker says to you, Cliff, it's fine, you don't have to pay me this week. That's great. You negotiated that. Send him an email
Right.
that says,
You just confirm to him. Thanks.
I'm confirming.
Steve.
I'm
Right.
confirming. Thanks, Steve.
Get it on the record.
That you told me this, because if push ever does come to shove, you want to make certain that
Right.
you've documented that. And I happen to be working with a company right now in a turnaround situation, that there was actually a commitment on the part of the banker that the loan was going to be handled in a certain fashion, and it changed departments within the bank.
Cool.
It moved from the frontline loan officer to the managed assets loan
Right.
officer.
Yep.
And that managed assets loan officer wasn't privy to that conversation, and the managed assets person said, we're sticking to the letter of the written agreement.
Right.
And so it required a whole bunch of back and forth, bringing the other loan officer in. And the managed asset person was reasonable and
Okay.
said, yeah, we will handle it the first way. But the effort that it took
Right.
to get
get
there,
everybody on board.
because it wasn't in writing,
Right.
was pretty big.
Yeah.
All right. I think the next piece is actually starting to work on the problems.
Right.
And here we have, are there quick fixes? It depends on what the problem is.
Yeah.
If it's a pay me by tomorrow problem,
That's serious.
that's serious, but is there a way to raise cash really quickly?
Right.
Can you call your customer and say, hey, pay me tomorrow or pay me today instead of in 4 weeks when it's due?
Yeah.
You can talk to a supplier and say, can you wait for my payment that I had promised to make you this month?
Communicate.
You can negotiate with your landlord that perhaps they'll give you a reduced piece.
Right.
There may be some quick things that you can do.
Quick cash.
Yeah,
Right.
quick quack.
Yeah.
Quick
Quick
quack.
cash.
Quick quack.
Right.
Yeah, but some of the things are longer term. There was another turnaround with a machine tool company that I was working with that actually had some very fundamental issues in their processes. They were having difficulty pricing. And they actually needed to understand better what their gross margin was. So there are longer term fixes that deal with processes,
Okay, yeah.
pricing processes, sales processes,
Right.
distribution processes.
Those are marketing.
Yeah.
Right.
So the trick is you got to have some time to do that.
Right.
And in order to have time, you got to have an agreement with the bank not to move so quickly.
And you also need to let the bank know that these are the things you're going to do, and it looks like we will get there in some period of
Right.
time, and we'll be a much stronger company, and you'll be much happier as a bank.
Absolutely. And one of the key things that comes up again and again is the issue of collateral. And collateral is the assets that have been pledged to the bank.
Right.
And
That would
almost
be what, inventory, receivables,
cash.
cash. Right.
You may also have a personal guarantee.
Right.
You may have a piece of real estate. You may
got
have
equity in it.
equipment.
Right.
All of these kinds of things. If you are in a demand situation
Right.
where you're negotiating with the bank, you're almost always going to have to redetermine what the value of that collateral is.
Okay, there comes the
Okay?
balance sheet into play.
Yeah, and you need to be prepared for that and not want to fight it.
Right.
Because it's going to cost you some money.
Right.
Because they're going to, depending on your type of business,
Right, yeah.
if you're a business that doesn't have any of those kind of assets, this won't come to play.
Right.
But if you're manufacturing or distribution, you may need to have an appraisal. And the appraisal,
You may need somebody to come in and appraise the equipment for current market value.
actually,
inventory.
it'll be more than current market value. It
Yeah.
will be liquidation value.
Oh,
And even beyond that, what's called hammer value or distressed sale value.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's a lower number.
That's a low number.
That's a much lower number.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you want to be thinking about as you're finding out collateral is finding out what the bank really needs. Because very often they'll start by saying, okay, we want to hire an appraiser to appraise your equipment. You say, okay, what's that going to cost? And they're going to say it's going to be $1,700. And you say, ouch. And there's something called a desktop appraisal, where you get an appraiser simply to look at your equipment list and the serial numbers and the description, and they may be able to give you a partial appraisal that's going to be on an hourly rate,
Yeah.
not all the bells and whistles.
Okay,
So
yeah.
these are things that are negotiating, but you as a company aren't going to know that
Right.
unless you've got somebody on your team helping
There
you.
comes the expert who's got the scars, been through this process
Right.
before, and said, no, we don't need to spend the $1,700. Maybe we can do it a simpler way and satisfy the communications the bank
Exactly.
requires. Okay.
Exactly.
Yep.
So that leads you into developing the action plan.
Right.
And the action plan is really key because this is where the decision is made. Are you going to be able to repair your relationship with the bank and stay with the bank?
Right.
Or are you going to have to refinance someplace else?
Okay.
And believe it or not, repairing happens more often than you think it does.
Yeah.
In fact, I've got a company that I worked with 2 years ago that went into bankruptcy because its problems were so severe and it needed to restructure in bankruptcy, turned around and got financed by the same bank
Excellent.
coming out of bankruptcy.
right.
So the relationship can be repaired, and it's repaired.
And they hired a professional as well as you to come in
Oh,
and work on the
absolutely.
situation. Smart.
They had the best. They brought in a interim controller. They hired a superb bankruptcy attorney. They used a lot of people
Good.
to help them. But
Smart.
what was key was the negotiation of what's called a forbearance agreement. And the forbearance agreement lays out what are the things that have to happen and when they have to happen and what the date by which it has to happen.
All right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And the bank doesn't just give you this forbearance agreement, it charges you for it.
Oh, great.
And it can charge you a fair amount. And I was just working with another
Thousands of dollars.
I am, yes,
Yeah.
tens of thousands of dollars. Tens of thousands of
Wow.
dollars. And I'm working with one company that decided when they were negotiating their forbearance agreement not to use, they used their corporate attorney rather than an attorney that had been through this before. And they did that because the general terms of the forbearance agreement were excellent. The bank had given them more than 6 months to repair their problem, which is terrific.
Yeah.
It had charged a fairly low fee for the size of the debt.
Yeah.
But what the company didn't realize is there were benchmarks in here that said they were going to have to
Along the
reduce.
way.
Yeah.
All right.
They were going to have to reduce their line of credit by X amount by Y date. And they thought, okay, well, maybe we'll make that, maybe they won't. The problem is when you violate something within
The
a
whole-
forbearance agreement,
Yeah.
you get another forbearance agreement that then they charge you again to renegotiate those points. So you don't want to go, when you go into a
Right.
forbearance agreement, you want to really believe that
Make
you
sure
can
you
meet
live up
those.
to every one of the benchmarks that are
yeah.
there. Okay.
And you want to, in your action plan, you want to be thinking about what are those measurable outcomes that you want to have?
Right.
It may be unit sales.
Right.
It may be cash flow. It may be communication and reporting. But it's going to be specific action items that you can mete out on a timely basis.
Right. Okay.
All right. So we've kind of gone through the big pieces of the trouble situation, but I think that there are some important lessons learned. And the first one is so silly, it's read your mail.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
you might even catch
Yes.
that first. Default
It is a
letter.
true story. The turnaround that I had about 4 years back had gotten multiple letters from the bank and had read them and didn't think they were serious because they had showed them to their lawyer, who was a real estate attorney, who said, those don't look serious to me.
But real estate attorney is the operative adjective, right?
Yep, who was a wonderful real estate attorney.
I'll bet he is. Right.
Yep, yep. And then the next thing is truly understanding what your bank needs.
Right.
Because a default letter can simply be a request for attention.
Right.
A rather strong request
Yeah, it's a
for
very strong
attention,
one, yeah.
but it doesn't necessarily mean that the bank wants you out.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons that I said, whatever you do, don't panic and keep your cool.
The default letter is just a warning shot.
Yes, it may change from there.
Right, to
but,
demand,
But
right.
since the bank is doing that merely to protect its rights,
Right.
It's not the end of the road.
Right.
Okay.
Good.
And get help.
Yeah, we've
I mean,
mentioned. And
you-
get the right help.
Get the right help. Get folks. I wish in our organization that we actually could go in and help companies in the way that they need it.
Right.
We're much more safari guides,
Yeah.
translators, coaches.
Right.
The first thing I tell folks to do is find a turnaround specialist
Absolutely.
that
can
can
come
help
in and
you.
spend 4 and 8 and
Yeah.
10 and yeah.
And they're very expensive.
Yeah, I know.
And they're worth every penny.
It'll be very
for-
well worth it.
It's what
to
they
save your
save you
business. Right. Right.
in the agony of dealing with the bank.
Right.
Because, and I'm not saying that the banks cause agony. I'm saying that their demands are difficult.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So be disciplined.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
In all issues, but especially in this
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
And I think we
Business is at stake.
exactly. I think we mentioned communicate more than
Did we
once.
talk about communication?
We mentioned it
Is
a couple
that
of
really
times.
that important? Yeah, I guess it is. Communicate. Right. Don't go and hide. Right.
And this is a period of time where you have to know your numbers
Right. Yeah.
down to the 2 decimals.
Mm-hmm.
Because that rolling cash flow is so critical
Mm-hmm.
that you're going to want to know where your money's coming from.
You better count your money while you're sitting at the table. I promise not
Not
to
to
sing.
sing.
No
Right, exactly. No singing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Melinda,
Okay.
thank you so very much. That
Oh,
was
it's my
fabulous.
pleasure. My
Thank you.
pleasure.
And
Thank you, Melinda.
Oh, it's nice
That's
to see
great.
you.
You'll have to come back.
My pleasure. I'd love to do that.
And thank you for being with us on the Fox Robbins Business Show. Hope you enjoyed this segment, and you can see this show and past shows on Google for a while, the
Yeah,
Google
right.
Video Library, although we may have to find another location for our library. Well, you can also see our episodes on the internet site for this show, which is
CapeMedia.org.
CapeMedia.org. Right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And you can also write us on foxrobbins@gmail.com. Don't write about the singing anymore. And thank you again, and we will see you next time.
Keep those cards and letters coming in, folks. I'm sitting here.
That's good.